So brace up, everyone, and let's get started with our major story of the day. It was indeed a day of drama. From the exterior of the National Assembly, protests and uncertainties hung over the planned budget presentation of President Muhammadu Buhari for 2019. But as the president was making his way into the chambers, it was obvious that the sort of drama that could ensue today. Well, as soon as the president began his speech, this happened.
Now, the chamber is a bit rowdy as lawmakers.
The economy has recovered from recession.
And the president had to respond to the situation in this manner.
To the honorable members, that the world is watching us, and we are supposed to be above this.
Muhammadu Buhari went ahead to present the 2019 budget of 8.83 trillion naira before the National Assembly. Some key assumptions of the budget include oil prices projection of $60 a barrel and total oil output of 2.3 million barrels per day. President Buhari also explained that a technical committee will be set up to determine the funding and impact of a higher minimum wage on the economy. The president's presentation had to weather a storm of persistent interruptions by both his opponents and supporters in the National Assembly, who either cheered or booed intermittently. Let's get to the conversation, everyone. Joining me is a whip of the Senate, Senator Olushola Adeyeye. He joins us from our Abuja studio to give us a sense of what is happening. And here in Lagos studio is the principal lead at budget. Gabriel Okeowo is an expert in the issues of budget. Let's get a sense of the politics that happened here at the National Assembly earlier today. We hope that we may be able to speak with some lawmakers of the PDP, but Senator Adeyeye, it's a pleasure having you tonight on the program, and thank you for coming. Well, let's begin with what may have come as very unusual. I'm not sure we have seen this kind of scenario played out. Why were opposition lawmakers booing President Buhari today?
Well, that's in the best tradition of politics. Sometimes we pretend that political process is always a smooth ride. That's not the lesson of history, not only within our republic, but outside the terrains of even Africa. Some of the most mature democracies in the world sometimes witness rowdiness, sometimes witness chaos, and shamefully, sometimes witness even physical fight. So it's quite normal that when there are high issues at stake and when there are differences of opinion as to what is happening in the polity or in the economy, that sometimes tempers might boil. I think, by and large, I was happy that the president was given enough serene atmosphere to read his budget, to lay his budget, and in the end, after he had laid his budget, I think it was a shame that the principal presiding officers of the National Assembly were not even allowed to reach their prepared responses. But thank God, Nigeria is bigger than any of us. It's a season of politics. And whether we like it or not, that will sometimes happen in the next 58 days. But Nigeria will survive, and our republic will march on to progress.
Embarrassed, Senator, you're the whip of the Senate, that your colleagues were uncontrollable, even when the presiding officers were saying, and banging the gavel, saying order, but it does look like they wouldn't listen to whoever was speaking, and they were chanting and booing and jeering and applauding. If you look at the presentation of President Muhammadu Buhari in other presentations that he had in the past years, he didn't have it like this. Is it that he's unpopular with the lawmakers or in the National Assembly?
It would be unfortunate for anyone to interpret what happens today in the National Assembly as a test of the popularity of the president. I say so because, one, even most of the PDP members did not join in the disruptive behavior that was exhibited by a few of the legislators. It doesn't take a large number of people to be disruptive. If you have a household of 500 people thereabout, and 20 people decide to be cantankerous and to be caterwaulers, there's sometimes nothing you can do. I mean, it's a parliament. You're not going to flog them. When I was in Elisha Grammar School, I was a boarding house prefect. You are allowed to take junior students, sometimes to punish them, sometimes to take them to the boarding house master. But a legislature essentially is an assembly of equals. I mean, what will the Senate president or the speaker do to ask anybody who wants to talk not to talk? It's my job as whip to actually maintain decorum in the Senate. And as the whip of Senate, I actually function as the chief whip of the National Assembly, and the whip of the House functions as my deputy, and we were helpless. There was nothing we could do about that. But you take that in its stride, because at the end of the day, calm was restored. The president read his budget. I mean, when Obasanjo was president, there were times I felt like booing him, but I had enough common sense to know that Nigeria had only one president. And on occasions like what we had today, a president is not simply talking to parliamentarians. A president is speaking to the nation at large, listening or watching through television and radio. A president is also talking to the history book. And therefore, whereas a minority should always be given the privilege and the right to express itself, the minority must also retain the common sense to know that at the end of the day, democracy is about the entrenchment of the will of the majority.
Senator,
I pray to God that the day never comes.
Would you be able to relate the incident of today as perhaps the lowest that lawmakers, your colleagues, have gone, considering the fact that the world was actually watching, and we heard and we saw how lawmakers, distinguished members, and honorable members of the National Assembly comported themselves? Would you describe these as perhaps an unfortunate scenario that could ever come from senior members of the society?
It's unfortunate. But let's face it, the consequences are ephemeral. People simply play to the gallery of their own party or the gallery of those who are watching at home. The truth of the fact is, what you saw in the National Assembly today doesn't affect the running of the Ministry of Education, doesn't affect the running of the Ministry of Health, doesn't affect the running of NAFDAC, doesn't affect the running of the police. Essentially, it has to do with playing to the gallery. And sometimes, across the world, politicians play to the gallery. At the end of the day, what matters, as far as I'm concerned, is the president read his speech.
Okay, so let's come to it. Let's come to it, Senator. Sorry if I'm aborting again.
Applauded.
Okay.
And in the end,
let's quickly take us to break with this comment, Senator. In less than a minute, we'll go on the break. But let's face it, some of the concerns of the senators or the lawmakers, are you worried that they may be valid? They were telling the president that some of the things that he was saying were lies.
Such as what?
When the president was talking about performance of his government, there were obvious interruptions of lies. Are you worried that they may have concerns that are valid?
No, I'm not, and I'll tell you why. The reason I'm not is because some of them were not even listening to the president, which is a shame. A parliament is a deliberative house. It's a place where people are contemplative. It's a place where people allow wisdom and reason to subdue passion and emotions. For example, when the president mentioned the percentage of the performance of the budget, he was talking about the total budget. Two people who sat behind me protested because they thought he was talking about the capital project. And I had to correct them. And that's what happens. That's what happens when people don't listen.
All right.
A parliament
let me pause you on a button again.
Apologies, we show that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we listen more than we talk.
Okay, Senator, let me pause you for a moment again. Let's take this break. We'll hear one of the lawmakers who spoke after the event. We tried to bring them into the studio for this program, but we hope that they may be able to talk, especially about their concerns as they raised them when they were booing or jeering on the floor of the National Assembly today. We'll hear them when we come back from this break. We'll talk more, so stay with us, everyone.